Wherever you are on your leadership voyage, it starts here.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Leadership Voyage, the podcast dedicated to your pursuit of becoming a great leader. I am your host, Jason Wick. The show can be, you can check out more of the website, leadership.voyage, or wherever you listen to podcasts, or please take the time this year, send me an email, startyourvoyage@gmail.com. My name's Jason Wick again, and I'd love to hear from you. What do you enjoy about this show? What do you wish this show would do? What aren't you enjoying? Any of the above. Who would you like me to talk to? What topics am I not covering that you wish I did? I'd love to hear from you. So please email me, startyourvoyage@gmail.com. Just take a minute, 2 minutes, and drop me a line. I'd love to hear from you. Remember that I myself am an Instacart customer. Hugely convenient at some inopportune moments for me to get groceries to the house, juggling kids, work, hobbies, etc., weather, whatever it is. You can get free delivery on your first order of $35 or more. Groceries hand-picked by shoppers and delivered to your doorstep, like I said, is as quickly as 1 hour. So check it out. I can vouch for the service and have not had an unsatisfactory experience yet. So today my guest is Dr. Bridget Cooper, aka Dr. B. It's a really powerful conversation. I encourage you to stick this one out because we get into what it takes to be unflappable. Unflappable. That's the name of her book from 2023, I believe it was. We get into a lot of different things about looking inward, about interactions with others, stress, how this all affects performance, and what we can do about it. It's a big topic, but hang in there. Have a listen to Dr. B and her wisdom on all of this. Anyway, let's get right to it, everybody. Here is my discussion with Dr. Bridget Cooper here on Leadership Voyage. All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of Leadership Voyage. I am pleased to be here with Dr. Bridget Cooper, aka Dr. B. Dr. B, it's great to be with you today.
Oh my goodness, so great to be with you, Jason. Thanks for having me on the show.
Absolutely. And we were just talking a second ago. We were trying to get together last fall. For whatever circumstances, it didn't happen. So it's a long time coming. It's worth the wait. We're going to get into some really fun stuff today. So once again, it's really nice to see you.
Super excited.
So kind of the impetus for this discussion in the first place was your most recent book. I think you've got at least 7 or so books out there, something like this, right? And the most recent book you've written is Unflappable: How Smart People Quit Overthinking, Ditch the Drama, and Thrive at Work. And I'm really looking forward to getting into that because I think a lot of people will be able to relate to what you bring up. Before we do that, I have to read a little quote that's early in this book. And the quote is, "I'm hell-bent on changing the world one life, one audience at a time because I know firsthand the cost of suffering, of stress, overwhelm, and drama." Could you share with us what kind of led you to this mission?
Yeah, so, I think our earliest experiences inform kind of the rest of our lives if we dig to them, well. And for me, I know that all of the upbringing experiences, all of the stress, the trauma, all of it came from one main source, which was the people who were entrusted with my care, the people that I entrusted in relationship, did not understand where their own power started and ended. And therefore, they either gave away their power to other people, and myself included, or tried to take power from others, myself included. And so learning about where we begin and end and understanding where our power comes from, where our influence can be best directed, became a life mission for me, because I found that if I could be clear about that, if other people could be clear about that, then they could really just burgeon with the power and influence they could have in their lives and really realize those successful experiences. So that was what it was for me. It was really, it's in a very driving passion that I have about looking at complex problems and finding more simple, clear solutions that empower people to make a difference.
Thanks for that response. I think, hearing you use that P word, power, it's a very, I mean, it's kind of hard. Shouldn't use the definition of a word in its own definition, or use the word in its own definition, but it's a powerful word. Power is a powerful word. It's really interesting to hear you talk about understanding where people can see how their power starts and ends and the influence that has on themselves and others. And I think we're going to touch on that right away here with some of the things that come up in your book. And what I wanted to start off with was stress.
Yeah.
Okay. So everybody hang with us here, right? Some of this stuff is pretty deep. It is, right?
Yeah.
But it affects, we don't just have a work person and a personal person, and it's a person, right?
Yeah.
So you talk about stress and how managing or not affects the quality of our interactions.
Yes.
And you outline this mathematical equation, which isn't too complicated for those who are not really into math. But could you explain that mathematical equation for us?
Yeah. So I always joke when I do presentations, I do a lot of keynotes and workshops across the country. And I talk about, I was not a math person. My mom was an accounting and finance major. My sister was a math major. And I don't know what DNA I got, but I did not get the math gene. And so whenever I do a mathematical equation, I always make sure I can count it on one, maybe two hands. That's about all I got. If I have to expose my toes, we're done. We're just done.
It's a good rule. I like it.
Yeah. So I look at stress as being a very simple mathematical equation. It is the difference between what we seek to control and what we can actually control. So we're looking at what can I actually control versus what am I trying to control? And in that difference, in that gap is where we feel stress. And so if we're looking at, perhaps going to, driving to work in the morning, and we get behind somebody and there's a traffic jam and we're like honking our horns, or in our heads, we're saying all sorts of things like, oh, come on, hurry up, move over, get there, right? That stress is originating in us wanting to be able to move traffic, be able to get to a location faster when we don't have control over that. And so for me, when I'm looking at how do we mitigate stress, part of it is where are we focusing our energy and attention? And when we focus our energy and our intention in what we cannot control, we are going to feel more of the negative stress. Stress can be good. Stress, feeling like, oh, I've got this deadline and I'm pushing toward it. Great. If we have all of the things at our disposal to be able to accomplish that goal and hit that deadline. When we don't, then we feel very ineffective stress. So for me, it's focusing people on what is it that you can control, what is it that you cannot, and putting our energy, investing our energy and our focus in those things that we can actually have some dominion over.
It strikes me that there are probably a lot of things we're focused on that are out of our control, but we're not really even aware that that's what we're focusing on, right?
Yeah.
And
that's so much where drama comes from, right? Is we get into some sort of, interaction with another person, somebody we're working with or working for us, and we're putting all of our descriptions, all of that narrative that we're describing to someone else around what that person is doing or not doing that is causing us this disruption. And we can spend days, hours, months, years, millennia, lifetimes, right, on that focus. But that gets us no further toward rectifying that drama. And we need to go inward. We need to put our focus and our attention inward to be able to determine what am I in charge of in this experience? Because if I focus on them, great, I'm going to have a lot of things to talk about at the bar, right? But I'm not going to be any closer to figuring out how to challenge and change the situation, right? I got to go inward. I got to figure out how I'm doing things that could be having some contribution toward where I'm finding myself.
But come on, what fun is that? I mean,
like Listen, Jason, I am down for the stories, right? And my clients get so, because I do a lot of coaching, and my clients know at one or two tries, they're like, okay, I know exactly where Dr. B is going to come in at. When they come to me and they're saying, you are not going to believe what so-and-so is up to. And I'm saying, oh, I can actually believe it. I can absolutely believe it. And the more time we spend on how incredulous you are that this is happening, the more time we're wasting in you actually getting to the other side of what's paining you. But hey, I'm down for it. You want to spend half our call talking about the other person? I mean, have at it. But we're not going to move the needle in how it is that you are performing and experiencing where you spend most of your time if we focus our direction there.
Yeah, and you kind of framed that up top about calling it, drama. And I think that sounds like the perfect word to describe putting your focus on those things out of your control or on the other person. And when you're talking about this equation for stress and the things that are out of our control, when we focus on those elements that we don't control and we have the result that is stress, bad stress, I suppose, then conflict comes in to the equation. And that's what I'm sure you spend time talking to your clients about. When we talk about, in your book at least, right, is talking about the relationship between stress and conflict and this vicious cycle that it can create, presumably out of my control. This person's acting this way. It's stressing me out. I'm mad at them. It's stressing me out. And we go on and on and on, right?
Yeah.
You talk about interpersonal conflict and intrapersonal conflict.
Yes.
Those who have heard you speak here for the first few minutes already are going to sense that you are focused on what we can control. And the note I had written down here is, even though we talk about inter and intrapersonal conflict, it almost always comes to be about ourselves, doesn't it?
Yeah. It's not that other people aren't problematic. We could spend, again, hours, years talking about the problems and the dysfunction that exists within other people. Absolutely. But we don't have control there. We have influence there, but we have a greater degree of influence there when we focused first on what we can control, when we are self-regulated, when we are taking, strides in developing our own internal mechanisms on managing stress, on looking at what our cognitive distortions are, on understanding where we're accountable, on self-compassion. All of those things build our internal resource center, our intrapersonal conflict resolution center. And then we can direct our attention better at managing what is happening with other people. If we think about, you're a dad, I'm a mom, with our kids, and we can equate many of our coworkers, bosses, and employees, right, to children, right, and ourselves too, right, that we can act like big kids. But when we are not in charge of our own self, it is so much harder to navigate the challenges that we have with those we're in charge of. So our children, if they are dysregulated and we are dysregulated, welcome to the chaos. But when we are regulated, we can hand over some of that regulation, some of that calm, some of that clarity, some of that direction in a positive, space to other people. So it really does start with us. And if everybody got that memo, if everybody picked up a copy of Unflappable and started using the tools in it, focusing on themselves first, and I have a whole bevy of tools and tactics on handling other people. It is not vacant in that area. But if we were all focusing there first, boy, would the issues that we're having with other people diminish, because if all of us were doing this in tandem, there we go to world peace and, a life of perfection, which we're not going to get to, but we're going to try for Unflappable anyway.
What you're describing sounds very empowering to me, right? And I would say that's where it sounds like they come back to how you opened this conversation, which is by identifying where we can control, which is kind of inherently where we have the most influence. That's how we embrace the power we have. Is that right?
Yeah. Absolutely. And I think, what I talk about, and I do this also in my workshops, I talk about the difference in like the animal kingdom between a lion and a squirrel.
Okay.
Right. Now, you don't see a lot of lions getting hit by traffic, right? You see a whole lot of squirrels. And again, part of it's where they're occupying their space, right? But squirrels, their energy is not in being calm and clear and intentional. I mean, you think about 80% of the nuts they never find again, right? They turn into trees, you know? And so, but a lion, before a lion acts, a lion surveys its surroundings. It comes to a point of real clear direction and intention, and then it moves. So if I'm going to follow one or the other, I'm going to be looking to follow someone who's got lion energy, not someone who's got squirrel energy. And that's where our ability to kind of what I call control light, which is, but I want to control those people in my environment. All right, great. You know what you can do? Get some lion energy going on in yourself. And then other people are more likely to follow you, and you're more likely to have influence, which is control light. It's like the control over other people that isn't really control. And then you can see the needle moving in those interpersonal dilemmas.
I love it. And I think the analogy of the lion versus the squirrel is very easy to capture too. I mean, we all have images in our mind, seeing that lion just sitting there, kind of chilling out, looking around, all these little pesky insects on them, and they don't really care. And they're just kind of surveying everything and deciding what to do next. Whereas the squirrel can't decide which direction to run in the street, right? I mean, so
we've all slammed on our brakes a considerable number of times, Jason, trying to figure out how to avoid the squirrels in our midst, right? And I think, you know, we all have squirrel energy at times, right? We're all like, you know, bouncing around, jumping between things, you know, and it's not that we never occupy those places. It's just, where do we want to occupy the most significant amount of our time? And for me, it's in lion energy, right? It's in that calm, it's in that clarity, that intentional behaviors. And that's what Unflappable really is based in, is starting understanding where stress comes from, understanding what can mitigate and increase stress so we can balance that well, moving into what we can control, what we're in charge of. And then once we've positioned ourselves from a place of strength there, then focusing on how can we then use that strength, that clarity, that centeredness, that calm, that unflappability to be able to help our interactions with others go more effectively and productively.
Wonderful. So we're setting that system up, and with Unflappable and your teachings, we've got tools that we can eventually put in play here. So let's talk through an example. And I wanted to start with a hypothetical, but right now in the moment, I think I'm going to go with the personal example. So I worked with someone 20 years ago, and what would happen is they would come in to the office and they would eat their breakfast. Okay. And we sat a few feet from each other, and they'd come in, they'd put their feet up on the desk, they'd grab their cereal, and they're chomping their cereal. And for whatever reason, right, this just irritated me, right? And I mean, I guess other people will identify it in some form, whatever that is for them. But I'm like, every day, even before it happened, I'm already like, oh my gosh, what am I?
What is Bob gonna do today? That is
exactly.
What does he have? Does he have Captain Crunch? Right. Is he gonna have grape nuts, for crying out loud?
Grape nuts, I love it. So if I understand some of the concepts in the book correctly here, we kind of can get into this victim mindset, right? In something like this. So what would you tell us, or me, I'm here, what about that situation was in my control, or was in someone else's control if they have a similar situation that I wasn't focused on?
So let's go into our time traveling machine, right? I'm going to do a little, you know, Mr. Peabody, right? You know, and we're going to move ourselves back, whatever number of years that was, when we're going to call him Bob. Bob is going to be strolling into the office any minute now, and he's going to plunk down on his seat. He's going to kick his shoes up on the table, and he's going to start chomping next to you, right? Now, setting aside, and I'm going to put a pin in this, there are some people who there is a neurological disorder that can make the sounds of people eating, right, actually make them dysregulated. So let's put a pin in that and say that's not the problem at hand. Because if that's the problem at hand, we've got another whole different set of systems that we're going to have to deploy, right? But if it's just a matter of, this is something that just really irritates me. Okay. So first of all, noticing comes first. We talk about I have in this book, also in my third book, I lose track. This is number 7. But my third book is Stuck You, and it talks about the change process. It deep dives into it in the 5 stages. And the first stage is awareness, which is being aware that you even have this irritation, that is the identified problem, that you're identifying. I'm focused on this guy's behavior when he comes into the office, and it's making me upset, and it's dysregulating me, it's getting me into a bad mood, and it's setting off my day in a negative spin. Okay, so then, all right, so what am I actually in charge of? Understanding where I'm coming into this. So if he's coming into the office and you're already braced, right? You're ready for battle. Like, here he comes. I can hear him coming down the hall, and already your cortisol is jacked up in your brain. A lot of what I talk about in Unflappable is really at a cellular level, how we are doing ourselves and other people a disservice by not respecting how we are set up at a brain level, and not doing the things that we could be doing differently to be able to regulate ourselves better. So just preparing for Bob to walk in the door and being negative about it and being on guard about it, you've already set off a cortisol spin. You've already got your adrenaline pumping. Your breathing rate is probably faster and more shallow. Your heart rate is up, right? And you're already in it. And then you're putting your focus, and part of our brain that focuses our attention on something is called the reticular activating system. And it puts our focus on what is going to happen in any given moment. So when we direct our attention at something negative that is coming into our experience, we're going to put all of our energetic and attentive resources there. So what I would say to that earlier version of you is, first of all, notice that the tension is happening and direct your attention at trying to reduce your tension. Going into a body scan, dropping your hands to your knees, like loosening your grip, noticing your breath, trying to come to a happy, calm place in yourself, right? And then there are some tactical, practical things, which is once he's come into the office, direct your attention at something else. Put headphones in, put a little music on low, right? Notice other noises in your environment, or start stopping your attention at noises and look at visions and information, right? Where you focus your attention, everything grows. And so I would be asking that. The other thing that we would deep dive into if I were your coach is, what is it about that behavior that is triggering off that response in you? Did you have an earlier iteration of this in your family? Did you have a friend who used to do this and was careless and then broke your trust? And then now every time a person who approximates that person comes into your purview, you're now really amplified in your response. So we'd be digging into some of those things that are happening inside of you that are creating that stress response. And that's where we'd start. And then we might, if we were getting into the interpersonal side of it, you've done all the intrapersonal things you could think of to do, you might start having conversations where you were finding things that you liked and appreciated about Bob. So you could say, in the grand scheme of things, I like 10 things about Bob. I don't like 2 or 3 things about Bob. So let me focus there. The other thing I could be doing is I could be talking with Bob about, hey, by the way, it's really, I don't know if you've ever noticed how like the whole place, you could drop a pin and all that we can hear is the crunching of cereal. May I request, is there any way that like the break room and the guy might be like, oh, dude, I had no idea that was bothering you. I can't hear it because I've got my headphones in and I'm focused on something else. I didn't know that was bothering you. Maybe he doesn't respond like that, and you have to just go on your merry way and find other ways to manage that expectation that he's going to do anything differently than what he's ever done in the past. And so often we create our own drama and our own stress in expecting other people to conform to our ideas about how things should be going
Mm.
instead of anticipating that people are going to be exactly as they are, because we are too.
That's a really powerful and in-depth answer, Dr. B. So thank you for, no, seriously, thanks for
You're
stepping
welcome.
through all of that. And my hope is that people can kind of relate to it, because what I find really interesting listening to you describe all of these facets of what I should go through or accept and be aware of, and this other person's behavior, there's nothing in this encounter that the other person had anything to do with me from their point of view, right? Kind of like back to your original example of going to work in traffic.
Yeah.
It strikes me that we tend to think that the rest of society has come out of their homes this morning with the vendetta of not getting me to get to work on time.
Yeah. When we ascribe intention to other people's very subconscious, unaware behaviors, we vilify other people, we put our power in their hands, and we are then at the mercy of whatever behaviors they are going to display. So if I think that the person who cuts me off in traffic meant to do me harm, was irritated and coming at me, I'm going to feel a stress response. I'm going to feel agitated and aggressive. If I'm thinking, boy, that person probably, maybe they just had a bad day. Maybe they're rushing to work because they woke up late. Maybe they're sick and they didn't even see me coming, right? They're just like, they sneezed and they just lost sight of something, right? Like so many other things could be happening. But when we ascribe an intention, we naturally square off against other people.
As soon as we vilify, we're giving away that power, because as you've suggested, the power is most influential when it's focused on what's closest to us.
Right. If somebody else is the villain, then just looking at all of the stories that we have, all the tropes in movies and animation, is if there's a villain, there's a victim and there's a hero, right? If we box people into those roles, then who's the victim in the scenario? It's usually us.
There's a question that's been kind of lingering in the back of my mind for about 10 minutes here. And I've talked to several people on this show over the last few years, and many of them are coaches around a particular functional area in most cases, okay? But I think I wrote you an email in the fall when I was reading this book, and I think I said something like, I got to be honest with you, Dr. B, this book is really hitting me hard.
Yeah.
It's some things to like actually read them and not just like try to read it academically to prepare for a guest, but actually to read it and think about myself. I was like, oh God, okay. Like it didn't feel amazing. It was like, okay, right? It was hard, to be honest, reading it. My question though, that I want to say is I've interviewed a lot of coaches and it's about functional areas, but you're maybe the first or one of just a couple who are really getting to this deeper level with a very schooled point of view. And what I wanted to ask you is, where does the line of coaching end and therapy begin?
I love that question. And I get that question a lot because, I tell my story about how I got to being a coach, and I've been doing it for 20 years next week. 20
congratulations.
years.
Wonderful.
And I came to it because I call myself Goldilocks. So I started off and I did human resources, where I thought I was going to be helping people with their careers. I was going to be coaching and assisting them. And what I found that in the HR realm that I was in, and I was a number of different hats in that, it was very transactional and very business focused and very dry. And I thought, oh, this bed's too hard, So I went and I said, you know what, I'm going to get a counseling degree. So I went for my marriage and family therapy degree, which is based in systems theory, understanding the human's role in a system, the power dynamics, the roles and expectations and all of that. And that gave me such a rich understanding of humanity and groups and systems and clans. And then I got into that bed, and man, I'll tell you, Jason, it was too soft. There was so much like,
Yeah.
whoa, okay, we're going back into your family. We're like doing
Yeah.
this hard work. I was in my mid-20s. I was like, dude, I got to clear up my own residual trauma. Yeah, this is too much. Bed was too soft. So then I went back and I got my doctorate in educational leadership. And that led me to this idea of looking in my executive and corporate experience and higher education experience. It gave me an understanding more of how people were working together, how the person came into that. And I thought, you know what? This allows me to be a coach. This allows me to take my deep understanding of humanity, of how people are working within their family systems, the stuff that they bring from that, and bring into adulthood in positive and negative ways, and really help them be different. So when people are asking me about, my ideal client, it is that executive that knows that something is standing in the way of them getting to their next step, or something is blocking them from really enjoying the work that they're doing. And they have this nagging suspicion it's something deeper than understanding how a balance sheet works. It's something a little more like in the gut, right? There's some, sensitivity that they have, or there's some lack of confidence, or there's some aggressiveness or some dysregulation. And they're like, I don't want to be in therapy for this, but I know that I need to be able to dig into this a little bit deeper. I need to trust someone with this piece of me so that they can change this. And so the difference for me when I look at that, so I know I've been trained as a therapist, but I work as a coach, is a couple of things. One, if there is a mental health disorder, whether it's depression, clinical anxiety, or some personality disorder, something that is disruptive, I am going to mandate that they see a therapist for that, because they have the current training, the best and the brightest of that training to be able to identify, regulate, medicate, and treat that. And I want to make sure that my client is well taken care of. Therapy also tends to go deep, right? They go real deep. Now, I go as deep as I need to. And when I get into some of my contracts that we talk about and some of my other approaches, there can be some deep, powerful moves. But I'm going deep, and then I'm popping people back up, because I'm focused on figuring out where they can go from here. So in a lot of ways, therapy has caught up to that, right? There's a lot more therapists who, to me, are doing a lot more coaching, right? Whether it's CBT, DBT, some of that stuff, like those modalities are much closer to coaching. So we're kind of converging, I think, but there is, for me, a difference in the level of disruption that person has in their life. And I want to make sure they have support. And I've turned clients away and turned them to therapists so they can do some of that deeper work and regulate and medicate if they need to before they get to me.
Great answer. Thank you for all of that. And I think I do appreciate the Goldilocks analogy, right? Because you found your ideal fit, which is ultimately enabling you to have the greatest impact on other people. So wonderful.
Yeah, thank you.
Before we start to wrap it up, because the time goes very fast, you kind of alluded to when we were going through my example, you started with awareness and touched on some other things. You've got this 5-step framework that you reference in the Unflappable book: awareness, acceptance.
Right here.
Beautiful. Very good. Awareness, acceptance, assessment, action, and adjustment. And we're not going to have time to step through all that in detail. But what I would love you to be able to highlight for everyone listening is, ultimately, if someone embraces this framework, what does that look like for them? What do the changes look like? Something like that.
So first, as we talked about in that earlier example, just the awareness that there's something wrong, there's something that is out of sync, something that could be better, something that isn't working for me. That's a pretty clear step, but it can take a deeper dive than some people know how to do. And that's where a coach comes in. And then the next is this acceptance piece. And this is a big one, because it's not just acceptance that I have to make this change. It's acceptance that I got to exactly where I am as a direct and predictable result of all my experiences and decisions to this point. So if I want the future to be different, I'm going to have to do something different. And also the acceptance that things are going to change, and often with success comes loss. we leave people behind sometimes when we make positive changes for ourselves, because if we change a dynamic that has been unhealthy and dysfunctional in the past, and the other person isn't on board to do some changes of their own to make that different, you can lose relationships. So there's that piece of acceptance as well. And then there's this piece of assessment. Okay, so what is the change going to, what is it going to encompass? What are the steps necessary? What are the aspects? And again, working with a coach can really help you identify what those pieces are, what you got to do them, and what are the bonus pieces. And then there's the action step, which is where all the fun happens, right? Where you're actually putting, pen to paper, you're putting, your foot on the gas, and you're taking action. And throughout that, and at the end of that, there is this adjustment, and there's also assessment, right? You kind of, they don't always go in exact, just leave a step and you never go back, but you're doing an assessment throughout. And at the end of, how did that work? Did I have my focus on the right thing? In doing the action, did I realize that actually there's this other piece that I didn't see before? And now I need to go back and kind of go through those steps again to get myself in a little bit different direction. I thought it was, changing the organization of my staff and putting myself more in a strategy space, but I'm realizing it was really that I didn't know how to interact with my staff, and now I have to go back and kind of figure out how to be a better manager, right? So it could be that sort of thing where you have to recalibrate, but that's what that adjustment piece is at the end.
Great.
Yeah.
I also liked how you talked about kind of assessment as a kind of a continual thing throughout the process.
Yeah.
That's great. Yeah, love that angle.
Yeah, and we know that, right? We're always assessing, we're always taking inventory, taking stock, and going round and round. It's a very iterative process. I tried to make it structural in a sense of that you could follow its sequence, but we know that we're messy. We're just messy. Yeah.
We are.
Yeah.
Okay, Dr. B, before we get to let you tell us where everyone should go to learn more about your work, I ask every guest the same question at the end of the conversation. And that question is, what have you learned recently?
I learn this all the time, is the more I know, the less I know, right? This idea that the more curious I get, the more I realize where there are more places I need to learn more things. And I think that's been a continual thing for me of being very and I talk about, I promote it, having a curiosity stance, but that's changed for me because I think in my younger years, I had this sense that I had to have all this knowledge in order to move forward. I had to know everything and be certain of things. And I've just been learning more and more, and maybe it's just, hitting my 50s, that there's so much more that I haven't tapped into, so many more people and perspectives that I need to embrace and engage with so that I can be smarter and better every day.
Thanks for sharing that. It keeps us humble, doesn't it?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And also really more effective. I think a lot of leaders, a lot of people get real uncomfortable at this idea of what do you mean? I have to be certain. I can't just be curious. I have to be certain. And how powerful it is to be curious instead of being certain. I've seen transformations with my executive clients when they've taken that tack, and it's changed their entire leadership journey for the good.
Love that.
Yeah.
Good. Thanks for sharing that.
Thank you.
So for those interested in your work, your services, or the book Unflappable, where would we like to direct them?
Well, you can go right over to drbridgetcooper.com. That's drbridgetcooper.com. I assume it'll be in the show notes. And you can click on, grab a few minutes with me, talk to me about, coaching or consulting or training, keynoting, things like that. And there's also a link to buy Unflappable and to join my Unflappable community. I will not pummel you with stuff, but I will send you some free bonus tools that couldn't make their way into the book, and also just kind of keep you posted on book discounts and upcoming events and things that just occurred to me that might be helpful to those who are looking to be unflappable.
Great. drbridgetcooper.com, you said, right? Bridget Cooper. Perfect.
You got it.
Okay. Well, it's been my pleasure to talk with you today.
Let's see.
Dr. Bridget Cooper, AKA Dr. B, AKA Goldilocks. I'm going to throwing the end there, given the journey. I
There
love
you
it.
go.
But thank you so much for your time today. I'm sure people are going to get a lot out of this, and the self-reflection of all of this is super powerful and gets us all on that journey to being more unflappable. So thank you so much for your time today.
Got it. Thank you so much, Jason. Take care.
Okay, I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Dr. B. She is a very powerful interview. I'm not going to lie. It's great stuff. It's meaningful stuff. It's deep stuff. And I hope that you had the right mindset coming into this one. It's a really important conversation, I think, to have, and a really important self-reflection to take. As a quick reminder, the show's website is leadership.voyage. You can find us wherever you found us already, so I'm not going to bore you with that. And please reach out to me, Jason Wick, your host, at startyourvoyage@gmail.com. I'd love to hear what you like about the show, what you'd like to see differently about the show, who you'd like to hear from, like me to talk to, topics, anything like that. Please reach out, startyourvoyage@gmail.com. Quick reminder, I'm not going to go through the whole spiel again, but Instacart, there is a link at the bottom of the episode notes that you can check out. And finally, let's get to your episode summary. Stress is an equation. Stress equals what we seek to control minus what we can actually control. Notice where we focus our attention. Is it on things we control or not? And drama comes from focusing on what others do that upsets us rather than looking inward. Conflict. When we talk about conflict, stress and conflict can create this vicious cycle. And interpersonal conflict and intrapersonal conflict both largely stem from ourself. Looking at ourself is the important part. Yes, we can acknowledge other people are indeed problematic, but we don't have as much control or influence over them. Influence. We have most influence over ourselves. And you're most likely to influence others with lion energy rather than squirrel energy. How do you change your behavior? It's this 5-step framework: awareness, acceptance, assessment, action, and adjustment. And what I love at the very end, Dr. B mentioned that curiosity may be more powerful than certainty. That was a great realization. Okay, everybody. Until next time, you all take care.